All right, so I am given these two functions and I'm asked to find the domain of these algebra of functions, so things that are being done here. So what I do is I look at each function in, who does a highlighter? I don't need a highlighter. I look at each function individually first. So I have 8x minus 1. And remember the domain, or what x values can you plug in that's not going to make this function squawk? I think you can plug in anything, right? Because we're not dividing. The only time domain really gets crazy is if you're dividing or square roots, radicals. And so my g of x, I can see then will be the same. So the domain of f and g. If I add these two functions, that's not going to change the domain and range. So the f plus g will still be negative infinity to infinity. If I subtract these two functions, that's not going to change anything. Remember, even when I multiply, remember I told you the only time it gets crazy is if you're dividing. So even multiplying the first function by itself. So all of these are all real numbers. These are when it gets crazy, right? Because you have to worry about dividing by 0. So if I look at f over g, all I care about is this denominator. What is going to make that equal 0? And I believe it would be 0, right? So I could plug in any negative number up into, but not including 0. And then union to the other side, don't include 0, and go all the way up to infinity. The same thing works if I'm looking at g over f, where now, let me get this where I can see my function up here. There we go. So now I'm looking at, on the bottom here, when 8x minus 1 is going to equal 0. That's a big no-no because I'm going to divide by 0. So I could just simply solve this and see that when x equals 1/8, this is going to be equal to 0. So kind of the same thing as above, 1/8 union, jump to the other side of 1/8 and infinity. So again, the first ones were really fast. In fact, I just copied and pasted them in the answers because you're never really concerned if you're not dividing, and neither of these functions had radicals. All right, so now I'm going to go and do all of this crazy stuff. So I'm going to bring up a new page, and remembering that my functions were f of x equals 8x minus 1, and my g of x equals negative 9x squared. First thing I want to do is add f of g of x. Well, that's pretty easy. I just simply add them. So plus negative 9x squared and 8x minus 1 minus 9x squared. When I subtract, you want to be careful, and this is why I typically put the functions in parentheses. Here's the first function minus, here's the second function, because now I can see, oh, a negative and a negative, that's going to become positive. All right, next let's multiply the two functions. So multiplying would be 8x minus 1 times negative 9x squared. I would distribute this, so this would be negative 72x to what, the third power now. And then I would distribute this, negative and a negative would be plus 9x squared. If I want to multiply the function f by itself, 8x minus 1 times 8x minus 1. Remember, this is FOIL, so that would be 64x squared minus 8x minus 8x. Negative and a negative is a positive. And this would give me 64x squared minus 16x plus 1. All right, now let's see about dividing. So my f divided by g is going to be 8x minus 1 over negative 9x squared. And I don't see anything that I can cancel, so that's the final answer. Kind of the same thing for the g over f. I plug in my g and then my f. And again, seeing nothing that can be canceled, so that is my final answer.